Did you touch the AC, Ken?
No. I don't know how to use the AC.
It got hotter since you said it was too cold.
Well, I know.
Did anyone touch the AC?
I did, it was very hot in here.
Still hot, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do I have to hit the gavel?
You don't, just call it to order.
I know, it's like, all right. So I am calling the planning board meeting of September 17th to order. We have a quorum, barely. Oh, I need to say who's missing. Okay, so John Jones is missing. Marcus Williams is online. Bob Markleese should be online. Okay, and who else? That's it, I think. Who else is missing? I think that's everybody.
Yeah, that's it.
That's everybody. So if we could consider a motion to allow remote participation from Marcus, if I could have a motion.
I'll make a motion that we consider remote participation.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so moved. You're in, Marcus. I can't see you, but you're in.
He's at the corner of
He's
the
in the
screen.
corner.
Okay.
Oh, there he is.
If I don't do that, you'd be looking at Marcus the entire meeting. Just
Well, I could look at Marcus the entire time, you know. He's a nice dude.
Hey, Austin, geez. Let a lady have the honor.
no one would be able to see the entire board.
Okay, then I understand.
Okay.
Now, Austin, I just want to mention something to you. I don't know if Marcus has caught this. The whole room is reversed. Everybody's backwards. And
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
That
Yeah,
is-
I was gonna ask Austin, why was he sitting in my seat?
that is actually on your end. That is a default setting in Zoom.
Okay.
Really? Okay.
All right. Adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or changes?
No changes?
None? Can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right, and adoption of the previous minutes. Anyone have any questions, comments, additions, grievings?
No.
Can we make a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented.
It's like, there's only so many people who can second and approve. All in favor? Aye. All right, so moved. Do we have anyone for public comment? I see everyone in the audience is sitting in the back, so.
We fight.
All right, so we're moving on from that. All right, then we're just going to go ahead and move into our first item of discussion, the recommendation of zoning map amendment 2024-2.
Okay, so this is a continued discussion about the zoning map amendment to rezone the Weddington Chase subdivision from SFR3 to SFR2. Based off conversation and discussion at our last meeting, staff wanted to confirm that there were 19 lots that are corner lots, that those existing structures on those lots would be conforming with the side corner setback if rezoned to SFR2. That information is included in your guys' packets. Basically, we went through the surveys that we had provided as well as estimate based off of GIS to confirm the side setback in SFR2 is 21 feet off the side corner street. And based off of the surveys provided and what we have determined through GIS, there was only like 3 that we didn't have surveys for, but GIS is about 26 feet, so I think it would be in compliance. With that being said, at this being a staff-initiated rezoning, planning board, can recommend or direct staff to then proceed with requesting council to call for a public hearing as well as proceeding with the neighborhood meeting to notify all residents. If that's not the request of planning board, then I can also then relay that to council and they can concur or then direct me to still move forward. And but it would just be based off a recommendation that it was not recommended by planning board. So. Is there any questions on the request?
Did you say you've already let everybody know in Weddington Chase that it'll be changed?
No, I have not. That's, once again, if planning board decides to recommend and move forward, then in short, what staff would do would then send a neighborhood meeting notice and potentially hold a neighborhood meeting here, either at Village Hall or at their amenity center. Per the MDO, all rezonings have to have a neighborhood meeting. That neighborhood meeting consists of sending a mailed notice to all properties within, I always get this mixed up, 1,300 or 1,600 linear or feet from the property boundary. So essentially, I would take the neighborhood, and it would be sent to everybody in the neighborhood, as well as all adjoining property owners within, for what the ordinance requires. That is a hefty amount of mailings and notifications to everybody, so I do want to talk with our attorney that if we do move forward with this, potentially just notifying the actual property owners within the neighborhood and conducting that meeting that way. Just because sending it to adjoining properties, it might create some confusion and more headache. However, I mean, you know, they still have a right to attend the public hearing and speak on it, but this is just a simple request. It's not changing anything significant outside of basically what their minimum lot size and setbacks would be for the neighborhood. So.
Anyone have any questions or comments?
The only question I have is, to do it just for the homes in Phase 1 doesn't really make much sense, and I know that in Phase 2, there's 13 homes that it shows that are smaller than the 17,000. So are we looking to approve it for, what was the total, 274 out of the 287? Is that what we're gonna call for?
So once again, that can be based off to your guys' recommendation. As the Phase 1, based off all the information staff has reviewed, all of Phase 1 would definitely be compliant. Phase 2, we did not check the corner lots in Phase 2. We checked all the corner lots in Phase 1. So that if we want to include Phase 2 in this rezoning, then staff would just have to do a little bit more research. I believe from a lot dimensional standpoint for Phase 2, there was a handful of lots that were under the minimum lot size for SFR2. However, with that 10% identified in Article 14, the flexible development standards, they could still be considered conforming.
They'd only be considered conforming if you did them as an entire group, not Phase 1 and Phase 2 at a later time, correct?
No, they could be conform regardless. If we do Phase 2 at a later time, it's still the same concept. Basically, Article 14 does allow that minimum lot size to be reduced up to 10% via a basically it's a minor variance that staff has the authority to grant that doesn't have to go to Board of Adjustments.
Yeah.
So what I would have to potentially do is then document those lots and provide it in writing, where then it's on file that those lots are under that. However, based off of the terms in Article 14, it's not considered a non-conforming lot. We would also want to just check with the structures. At that point, if there are a handful in Phase 2, and when I mean handful, like probably greater than 15, 20 lots, maybe even 10, it would not be recommended by staff to rezone Phase 2 to SFR2, just because that's a lot of documentation. However, with Phase 1, I think there were only 2 properties that all complied with the minimum lot size, but there were 2 properties that the setback was the issue, and those are easier to document for future, because those aren't going to be expanded in the front anyway. So it wouldn't create any nonconformities in that and for Phase 1.
Can you give an example? Can you give us an example of the benefit doing this for a homeowner?
There's not really one.
So then why do it? Well, you just said it's a lot of work, it's a lot of mailing, it's a lot of expense, it's a lot of everything. So why are we doing it?
This was a spinoff of the first zoning map amendment that you guys reviewed earlier this year for the one individual property in Weddington Chase to be rezoned from SFR3 to SFR2.
Correct.
And, at that time, council did not approve that. However, staff did make a determination based off the information that applicant did provide that it could be considered. And so staff basically, council directed staff to potentially look at reviewing this further, but like I said, planning board cannot recommend it, and I can go to council at their work session next week and say, planning board's reviewed this, it's not their recommendation to do it, and council can, at that point, potentially just say, well, then we're not gonna waste staff time any further, or they can say that they would like staff to proceed with bringing it for a public hearing. So we have done as much research as I think we can without actually then going door to door and getting these individual surveys. That's the only next to ensure 100%, it's not going to create any nonconformities, but based off of looking at GIS, looking at the plats, looking at the surveys that have been provided, I feel pretty comfortable in rezoning it SFR2, at least for phase one. But once again, it's in that extra steps that we still have to do to meet our ordinance requirement with notifications and stuff that is, it's not being paid by an applicant, it's being paid by the village. So that's the downside.
It just feels like there's gonna be a lot of confusion when you send all those notices out. Somebody's going, well, what's SFR3, what's FR2, what am I doing? And you're worried, you wanna create even more work, because then you gotta answer all those questions, and all those people coming to you.
And a lot of
And
this,
you're telling me there's no benefit to do this.
a lot of this was all addressed during when we did the MDO, with the open house as well as the FAQ that the village published for the residents to, inform them on the changes with the MDO adoption. However, like I said, I have not fielded any calls from anybody. Outside of maybe a handful of Weddington Chase residents that, were just curious on what the difference is. But when you kind of explain it to them, it's not changing. Even when they got zoned SFR3, it's not changing what was already there. There was no, SFR3 was the most consistent with what was on their plat, with a lot of those other neighborhoods that were annexed in from Union County into the village of Marvin throughout the years. However, and that's why it was determined SFR3, because we didn't have the time to do this during the adoption of the MDO, is literally look at house by house. We had to make the best recommendation to ensure no new nonconformities were being created and so on. So both of them are single-family residential districts. Their only permitted use is single-family residential. All it changes is the minimum lot size and setback dimensions, which all the lots in Weddington Chase are already built as well. So it's not really changing anything on the ground.
It just seems like this is really coming out of this one gentleman, this one homeowner's quest to be returned back to SFR2 status. Have you gotten any feedback, conversation, comments, questions from the rest of the residents?
No,
Do they even care? It's
So
not
the-
really in their benefit. We kind of went over this when he initially made his request, that going back doesn't really get him anything.
So in the information that that property owner presented the village, I believe there were roughly about 60 residents polled, and I don't know. There were 60 residents asked, and there were 59 respondents that said that they would like SFR2. I have the Excel. I don't necessarily have the signatures. I can work on getting that from the property owner that conducted these surveys.
No, but you don't have the actual, they were just verbally polled.
I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Were you polled?
Yes. No, silent.
I said, my understanding, this does not change anything on anybody's appraisal. It's still single-family residential. You weren't able to be subdivided before. None of those lots can still even be subdivided to SFR3. It's not possible. So, but I'm not an expert on, land appraisals, on how, a little bit on certain zoning, but when all those districts are still single-family residential, I don't see what the difference would be.
How much more time, so if you eliminate the mailings and you do a public hearing, how much more time will staff be wrapped up in this?
So that, I'll have to get some guidance from the village attorney on that. When you do mass rezonings like this, sort of how when we did with the adoption of the NDO, and I don't know if that there's a threshold in the state statutes for that, but however, it doesn't necessarily require you then to mail notices to all property owners or all adjoining property owners. We would put the public hearing signs probably throughout the neighborhood, like at the entrances of the neighborhood. And we would then definitely send mailing notices out to all property owners that the tax card for all those adjoining property owners and the residents in Weddington Chase, that the tax card is mailing address is not in Union County. Because we'll post it in the neighborhood or post it in the newspaper, and we'll post it here on our website, the notification, but legally, in the state statute, you have to post like if it was for an individual property rezoning, you have to post the property with adequate signage at least 10 days, no more than 25 days prior to the public hearing. You have to mail a mailed notice of the public hearing to all adjoining property owners, and you also post the public hearing notice in the newspaper. So, but there is some leeway with large-scale rezonings as such. So I just have to get clarification on our attorney on what he would want us to do, or what he would recommend. But you would at least be looking at mailing 100 and, you know how many is in phase one? 100? 287. 287 in phase one and phase two. So if we just do phase one, we would potentially still mail all the ones to, all the property owners in phase one?
I'm sorry.
100.
It says here phase one was 100.
132. So if we just do phase one, I would probably recommend at least doing a mailed notice to all 132 of those properties. But once again, we'd have to still look at meeting the state statute and our ordinance requirements there. And that's just that's the last thing staff has to kind of clarify on. We didn't want to go that route unless planning board recommends kind of moving forward with council considering this.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but do you think this is worth your time?
Like I said, from a zoning district standpoint, it's not changing much. So I don't really see it being beneficial, you know, with time and resource. That's why it's been dragged out, because we have other applications that, you know, are applicant driven that are paying to go through the process. And, you know, in Pullman eyes, like spare time, that's when we have been working on this and inquiring the data and information to keep this moving forward. But to your point, that's where staff doesn't want to necessarily move forward if it's not going to be recommended by planning board, and spending the time to contact our attorney to then also do the mailed notices and everything. So I know we've been talking about this,
You
but
just came around back into a circle.
yeah. So, you know, like I said, I don't see any benefit, and it's not changing. One of the property owners, you know, why he wanted this to be requested was that he sees it as if any neighboring properties that are in Union County annex into the village of Marvin that are undeveloped, that this gives them, hey, SFR3 is right there, we should be SFR3. That's not how that works. At the time of annexation, whatever the current property zone under Union County, we would then classify that as the closest per the MDO, which would most likely be rural residential, which means they would be annexed in and then have to go through the rezoning process for SFR 1, 2, or 3 if it was to be subdivided and developed. They can also do it concurrently, which then that just means we don't have to annex it. So.
Okay, does anybody have any
The zoning
questions?
doesn't affect the initial applicant because he lives on the interior.
Correct.
I say we move it to a vote.
All right, so the motion is, and this is just, we need to yay or nay. The motion is to recommend approval of zoning map amendment 2024-2 and find that the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the recommendations and goals of the Village of Marvin 2020 Land Use Plan, other officially adopted village plans, and is reasonable and in the public interest. So does anyone would like to, I guess we just call for a vote.
Someone needs to make that
You
motion.
need to make the motion, okay.
Someone needs to make it second, and it goes to an up or down vote.
That's what I just did, yeah. Well, I made it, I said it out loud to make it, yeah. So then someone needs the second, and then we get yea or nay. Anyone want a second?
Second.
All right, now we can vote. You up or? All in favor? All opposed? All right, so we are not recommending, but,
So staff will then present this to council at their work session. And if council can take your guys' recommendation not to move forward with it and basically direct staff to leave it at that, or they could direct staff to proceed, but then obviously your recommendation will be a part of their decision, so.
Did Marcus vote no? We didn't catch that.
oh, sorry, Marcus. Well, it doesn't matter because we just had majority, so.
I said,
Your vote still counts, Marcus. Are you in favor of or not in
Opposed.
favor? Opposed? Okay,
All yes or no votes have to be recorded in the minutes.
okay, thank you. Sorry, Marcus.
no problem.
Okay.
If he can vote remotely if we allow it, like if we take a vote to allow it. All right, we're moving on to the discussion and recommendation of CZ 2024-1 Marvin Grove 2.
Okay.
CZ.
So I know this is another one that's been on your guys' agenda over the last couple months. In your guys' packets is this detailed staff report. I'm going to go over the staff report and then turn it over to the applicant. It is in short, it is being recommended for approval tonight by staff, and staff is requesting the planning board to make a recommendation to approve, not to improve, or not to approve. Or, I mean, I guess, that can either be recommended to approve and get it passed or not. However, I'm going to go into the overview and the staff report. So Zepsa Capital has applied to amend their original conditional rezoning to include the 2.005 acres located at 9904 Newtown Road. And this request is basically to rezone that property from single-family residential 1 to the Marvin Heritage District commercial only. This would also then basically combine their original approval from CZ 23-1 approved last year with this one. The subject properties, I'm going to basically outline this as including it as you have in the site plan, you have track 1A, track 1B, and track 2. Track 1A is is the original property that was rezoned as part of the conditional zoning approval 23-1. Track 1B and track 2 are what is being requested in this specific request, which that current property is zoned SFR1. Surrounding land use and designation to the north is residential/common open space. The zoning designation is SFR2. The south, which is the Fincher property, is currently vacant or used as agriculture. It is currently zoned rural residential. On the east and west is both civic uses. To the east is the Village Hall property, as well as the future Village Hall Park, as well as on the west is the Wedding United Methodist Church. So this request is, like I said, is broken up into two phases. The proposed rezoning is to develop the total site to those commercial uses that are in accordance with the vision created by the Village of Marvin community through the approved Heritage District Small Area Plan. The rezoning of the site to Heritage District Commercial only enables the applicant to use and develop the site for the uses allowed in Table 8.1, which is also included in your packets. So Track 1A currently consists of approximately 1.51 acres, or 518 acres, which includes the existing 100-year-old farmhouse, carport, and shed. As part of the conditional rezoning approval for this property last year, it was approved to demolish the carport, shed structures, renovate the existing house with the intention to preserve the overall exterior appearance of the existing house there. It was also approved to convert to add a 1,500 square foot commercial kitchen, as well as two new buildings with a 5,000 square foot footprint. that are 2 stories for an additional 21,550 square feet of new gross building area for Tract 1A. Tract 1B and Tract 2, which is the reference as the Crane Store property. Part of this proposal, the applicant's proposing extending the parking lot while preserving the larger canopy trees present on the lot. This proposed plan includes an additional 2 new 10,000 square foot total buildings for retail and office use space, as well as it's including a stormwater pond with a walkable path surrounding the water feature. So the total additional on Phase 2 / Tract 1B and 2 is 20,000 square foot of new gross building, and including the existing renovation of the old Crane Store of that property. With that being said, the area of the property designated on new Tract 2 on the site plan is included in this conditional rezoning to avoid non-compliance with the MDO dimensional requirements for residential lots. However, new Tract 2 will be determined at a later date following the process, basically amending their rezoning on some of the specifics if they want to deviate from what potentially would be approved, i.e. permitted uses for the Heritage District as well as some of the elevations. Outlined in that development agreement, there are already terms regarding the look, characteristic, and renovation for the old Crane Store. So any deviation from that, they would have to come back and amend that plan if this rezoning is approved. For permitted uses, the intended uses for this development include specialty commercial and retail space offering goods and services such as ice cream, coffee, specialty foods, wine, gifts, and so on the first floor of all these new buildings. And then for the intent is for the second floor is with professional office type uses to be utilized on that space. If permitted or if approved, the property would be subject to all permitted uses outlined in Table 8.1 for Heritage District. There are a few that staff is recommending that are included as prohibited as part of this rezone, as part of the conditional rezoning that mainly is referring to any of the residential uses. The site plan doesn't have any, but however, just for clarification, just go ahead and nix any residential uses that are permitted in that Heritage District for the site. Getting into the overall site plan, tree preservation, the intent and based off of the site design is the applicant plans to save as many trees as possible. One of the big examples is that if you look at the site plan, there's an existing magnolia tree that was preserved. And you can see how some of their site was proposed, or their proposed site lays out. It is to preserve some of the natural existing canopy on the site. They will obviously be removing vegetation on the site for the overall land development. That any trees over 12 inches in diameter will be, per our ordinance, have to be mitigated for a 1-for-1 ratio, and or they would have to propose a fee in lieu for trees that they could not, if they couldn't meet that 1-for-1 ratio. The overall tree mitigation or tree removal and mitigation would be a part of their construction documents during the next phase if the rezoning is approved. For buffers, the overall rear yard buffer between the preserve and these two properties would be a 20-foot vegetated buffer, including a 7-foot high solid opaque fence on their property. And then there is an existing 30-foot common open space buffer on the preserve property. So it would be a total of a 50-foot buffer between the commercial uses and parking lot from the residential rear property lines that are located in the preserve. They also propose a 5-foot side yard buffer, including with evergreen screening and 7-foot and a 7-foot high fully opaque fence along the side buffer between the Weddington Methodist Church and this proposed development.
Can I ask a quick question about buffering?
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't remember seeing this last time. On the construction drawings, there's an opening in the buffer. It looks like it's probably for power lines. There's a weird like triangle thing there. What is that? I couldn't find it on the I couldn't find what it represented.
In the power easement?
In the,
Looks like it's in the power easement, yes.
yeah,
That's the drain. Yeah. There's a stormwater, like riprap drain, that's on the property line. Yeah.
okay, thanks. Just wasn't, I didn't know what it was.
So with open space, Tract 1A, which was part of the original rezoning, consisted of 25.112% of landscape and buffer and 16.81% of pedestrian-oriented sidewalk and outdoor amenity space, totaling 41.93% of reserved open space for Tract 1A. For this additional property, they're proposing an additional 49.74% of landscape and buffering, as well as an additional 10.67% for pedestrian-oriented sidewalk. All of this totaling 58.8 of reserved open space for Tract 1B and Tract 2, which in total, combining the properties, totals 38.43% of open space, as well as 13.27% of pedestrian-oriented space, which is above the minimum for open space requirements for the Marvin Heritage District. This also includes the walking trail being installed around their stormwater pond, which, per the MDO, does allow them to count that as space as long as the pond's not fenced. So it becomes a water feature, with it being a full wet pond.
Just FYI, looks like the I and the A in trails was,
Oh, no. Somebody didn't catch that.
That was a test.
With greenways, yeah,
I was like, wow, trials.
I know.
What are we trialing?
Greenways and trails, so the applicant's proposing to install their portion of the Marvin Loop, which is the 8-foot wide asphalt path along the front of their of the development. This includes in front of the Crane store, as well as the existing Tract 1A. The developer has the option to either construct it per the standards in alignment with the approved plans from NCDOT when the village has that, or pay their fee in lieu, basically the direct cost of what it would cost to construct that linear footage of path. They can pay a fee in lieu to the village, and it would just be constructed when the village goes out to bid to do the rest of the Marvin Loop. They also are proposing a 8-foot wide connection between the proposed development and to connect it with the preserve trail. The biggest difference between the original rezoning and this is actually moving that connection point closer to Village Hall, so it gets it further away from the existing residential properties there in the preserve. So it's a better kind of ingress egress point for any pedestrian activity, as well as it kind of drops out right at a fork where you can either go towards Village Hall or go into the preserve or continue walking down the trail. So overall, it's a better located trail connector being proposed. Parking, which I know has always been something that planning board has discussed, as well as that came up as a hot topic during the neighborhood meetings. The proposed development has an additional 65 parking spots and 2 additional ADA, which brings the total number of spots to 112. That's including the 47 that was approved as part of the Tract 1A rezoning last year. The overall development will have more parking per commercial square foot, despite the addition of those 2 buildings being added on 1B. The other thing is that, per discussion with the applicant, is we're looking at alternatives of looking to develop the Village Hall little portion, the 4.8 acres, to get roughly 25 to 36 more spots. Pull this up. This is a conceptual drawing.
That piece of property on the front end?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll show this for you.
Not
So
gonna be used for anything else, huh? Right here.
go out. So this is just a conceptual drawing, kind of showing the, whoa, what happened? Is it not full screen? So this is, okay. this is being proposed to develop it, the applicant is proposing to develop this, and staff is working with the village attorney as well as the applicant's attorney on getting this added into the development agreement and how it is done. However, this would add in, you would be losing 2 spaces there, or potentially the 2 ADA handicap spaces there, but adding up to 36. This is, like I said, conceptual, based off of landscaping and certain grading and how it'd have to be done. I think 36 is about the max, but they would at least be able to get 25, if not, like I said, more of that 36. So this would then allow to meet some of the parking concerns that's been brought up by planning board in the neighborhood and property owner or residents that attended the neighborhood meeting. Council has conveyed that they are supportive of this because it would also potentially allow for just additional parking in the area. But like I said, those the final details of all that is being discussed right now and being incorporated into their development agreement. Is there any questions on this?
Yes, so I'm glad that piece of property is being considered, but I also wanted to ask, I know that the last time we were here, we talked about there's like a calculation that gets run based on, square footage and the usage and all that kind of stuff. Did you, and I see the tables on the right, but it doesn't really say what the actual, rule of thumb recommendation is versus what we've got going here.
So looking at using Marvin Gardens and some other examples, one is that once again, the Heritage District per the MDO does not have minimum parking standards. So the table that's in Article 12, I think it's Article 12, with the minimum maximum for square footage does not necessarily apply to this. But using that as the gauge, it's roughly 1 for every 200 square feet of space. With this plan, with the 36, 112, they would be losing 2, so they'd have 146 parking spots. They're right at, we can do a quick calculation. Do you have, let me do this real quick, because I've got this pulled up. Let me do math real quick. So they would have to, based off of just using full 200, minimum of 200 square feet would be a total of 220 required spaces. However, with shared parking and other stuff, once again, this, I think, does definitely address the concern, because they're in this specific proposal, they're adding more parking spots than what was permitted in the original rezone, or not, that was approved as part of the original rezoning. On top of, they're adding less commercial space. And then adding the additional 36 spaces definitely, I think, puts them right where they should be, if not more. This has been discussed with the applicant, and once again, it's a push and pull. It's, what is the right number? How much do we want to have as a minimum, and how much are they going to need? And, ultimately, the goal of the Heritage District, as well as when it comes to minimum parking, is where you don't have more parking, where you don't have this huge impervious area that's never being utilized. And vice versa, you also need enough parking where these businesses and stuff will be sustainable, and making sure that they have, places to park for any of their, for people going to the restaurant or shopping at the businesses or using the office space. The other thing with this district having a lot of the pedestrian connectivity and so on, that does help weigh in on minimum parking from a planning standpoint. And so, once again, staff does recommend that the amount of a parking that's being provided, as well as with these additional spaces, is definitely sufficient for the development.
If the additional spaces happen.
Even if not, but yes, the additional spaces definitely push them over where staff feels comfortable in allowing. And like I said, the additional spaces are, I think, about 99% sure are going to happen. It's just that total amount. And even if you said knock it down to 25, that's still 25 more than they had. So
My next question or comment and question is, I'm glad to see the ADA spaces included now, but they're only in one location, so that's quite a hike for folks who have mobility issues to walk all the way across a parking lot to get to another building. So I'm glad to see the 6 spaces there, but in a way they need to be spread out. And so each building needs to have its own ADA.
So per ADA, there is a minimum of where the parking is at to the storefront. I think it's 200 feet. So with them losing this, and potentially if they move it over, that would be sufficient there. I do think too, they could look at adding 1 or 2 more, especially getting at these additional parking on the village property, then dedicating another spot or 2 to have a total of 8 ADA spaces would potentially be sufficient too. They have their van access up, wrong one.
Yeah, the van access is near the restaurant, but
Potentially doing another van access somewhere in this
I
location.
mean, if you've got rear entry in some of these, like into the building at the back, there needs to be an ADA space back there. You can't have,
You're talking about the additional 36.
no, I'm talking about all the ADA right
Well,
now
so
are
for
right.
For phase 2 or 1B, excuse me, yeah, you can see towards the back side or the north side, you would need. But if you were to put it down in the 36, if there was an entrance
Primary
into
entrance.
phase 1B for
Yeah.
the other 5,000 square foot building.
We could look at,
Suffice for there as
I'm
What-
just, typically, and I know that you said it's got to be within 200 feet, and that might be the law, but it's just not good practice if you don't have an ADA space in front of a door, the entrance to the building.
that's what our recommendation would be, is that you could, the way this is laid out is that you could take that interpretation as 200 feet from each building entrance where it's not, so then you could basically would just have to have a space or 2 spaces in front of each building, which then would allow for that. Which this does, I mean, outside of obviously losing that per this, conceptual drawing, they would have to add those back anyway to meet the minimum requirements, and that would put them in front of the 2 additional buildings being proposed on track 1B there. And track 1A in that back building, where they're located there is about the most sufficient place because there's no front parking for those buildings. You could look at considering adding some on the backside here, right here.
Or even
But
just taking the 6 that you've got and
spreading them.
separating some of them out. You don't need to put them all in one place, just need to.
Yeah.
Right, but if
So that's why
if
they're on
you're
the-
in a van, you've got a wheelchair or some sort of
Yeah.
cart, so it's like you can.
I think as long as they're following the ADA requirements, that's all we can ask.
We can work, yeah, they have to comply with ADA.
And believe me, there's enough groups that will
Yeah.
monitor that and let them know if they're wrong.
Which, like I said, based off the amount of parking provided, they have to provide a minimum of 6, and that's what's being provided here.
The phase 1 is 47, I'm sorry, phase 1 is how many square feet?
Total square footage,
Yeah.
let me get to my Excel.
Is it on the plan? Because I see the parking spaces for phase 1 is 47 spaces.
Mhm.
So what is the square footage of phase 1?
Phase 1 total square footage was 22,641, give or take. And that's including like the commercial kitchen addition, but their original proposal had 52 for phase 1A. They had to lose some spots, obviously, through the turnarounds here, mainly here.
So that comes out to about 2 parks per thousand. Is that right? Am I doing the math right?
So it'd be 22. What are you trying to determine?
Well, trying to determine how many parking spaces they have per 1,000 square feet in phase 1.
For restaurant spaces, it's 1 per 200 square feet, and then for retail and,
Yeah, restaurants about 13 or 15.
It's 1 space for every 480, so yeah, so about 2 per 1,000.
Still falls again, we don't have a parking standard, it was a recommendation, I think you've met some of that recommendation, I do appreciate it. But it's still also a little short.
And I will say that the applicant is still looking at adjoining properties and trying to work out those third-party agreements with those. But
No, I'm satisfied.
any other questions on parking?
The additional 36, so that is Village of Marvin land, and that remains Village of Marvin land?
That is some of the minor details that we are trying to work out. Two options are, one, the village convey the property, and it becomes part of their site plan. They maintain it, they develop it, they maintain it. It's off our books. The property can't be developed anyway in its current state. So from a financial standpoint, that's probably more beneficial. But the other way to do it is that we work out some type of agreement that either cost share to develop it, and then we maintain it. I mean, so that's just what I'm gonna work to get some final feedback with council and make that determination. But leaning as long as legally, like I said, from the legal side of it to village conveying property that we own, there's certain procedures and stuff that we have to go through. So just making sure all that checks out. But from my understanding through the state statutes is that it's under that threshold that it can still be conveyed to a private party through just a private, either sale agreement or just conveyance, like special warranty deed of conveyance.
Unless you throw no parking spaces out there, they're gonna park there after you're closed anyway.
Yeah,
So you're gonna have no parking.
correct.
And I don't think you're gonna chain it off and put no parking.
Nope.
Okay, that's even more.
So moving on, so water and sewer, nothing's changing there. Obviously, they are still gonna have water and sewer connection. Now the site, like I said, opens up more. So all of the site will be served by Union County Sewer as well as water. The developer will have to get those approval through the county and install those improvements. And then the other big change, like I said, they are adding a stormwater pond as part of this proposal. And that's just to meet the impervious area as well as just stormwater conveyance compared to what they were originally proposing was an infiltration system, and also trying to reduce the amount of impervious area by not paving the parking lot, but all the parking lot now will be paved, which I think will be better on maintenance and mobility and all that long-term. So any questions on the overall site? I'm going to turn it over to you now if you want to. I know I kind of probably stole a lot, but I just wanted to go through my report, but I'll let you, yeah, I'll pull up the PowerPoint. And then just make sure the green light's on and.
Okay, check 1, 2. Y'all hear me? Okay. So I appreciate Hunter's very thorough staff analysis. Given that, we're just going to hit kind of some quick highlights, go over the overview of the site plan again, and maybe talk a little bit more about kind of the goals of the Heritage District as well and how the project's meeting that. Quick introductions. It's good to be back here. My name is Matthias Young. I'm a land use attorney with Johnston, Allison, and Horde. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Zepsa Capital. We also have a couple people from the applicant team with us tonight as well. Starting with a quick recap of the project. Like Hunter said, this is 9904, 9908 Newtown Road. Total acreage is 3.5. If we go to the next slide. Both parcels are inside the Marvin Heritage District small area plan. Those two red parcels right next to Village Hall. So that's 9904 and 9908. And that red is a recommendation for Heritage District commercial only. Now, we talked about 9908 was previously rezoned last year. That's what we're showing on the site plan as tract 1A, just to keep everything straight. 9904, like I said, is currently zoned SFR1, and the applicant is requesting a rezoning to Heritage District commercial only, consistent with the small area plan. And some quick updates. Since the last time we were all together as the planning board, like Hunter said, applicant has submitted a proposed development agreement and a site plan. So I think now we just kind of start working through that site plan. Here we hit. So that's the site plan overall. And really the design is going to emphasize connectivity, amenities, and really trying to realize the vision of the Heritage District Small Area Plan by creating this kind of walkable mixed-use village center that the Small Area Plan is really calling for. And if we go to the next slide, we're kind of zooming in. So this is the area that is designated as Tract 1A on the site plan. Like we talked about before, this is 9908 Newtown Road. It was previously rezoned last year. Really, the only thing that's changing is kind of that change to the circulation and connectivity. As originally approved, Tract 1A just had a single in-out drive. Now you can see we have double drive with additional circulation lanes that are really improving the circulation on the site, as well as helping connect it to Tract 1B and new Tract 2. So moving on to, this is kind of that colored sketch plan that we've seen before for Tract 1B and new Tract 2. It's the 2 additional buildings, a ton of open space, and the crane store. So if we go on to the next slide, this is kind of a zoom in of the lower portion of the site, just help everyone keep their bearings. If you can see that area kind of blocked in gray on the top left, that is new Tract 2. It's the crane store property. It's currently owned by the Marvin Historic Trust, and the trust is going to retain ownership of that property after the rezoning. And then the rest of the portion is Tract 1B, and that is going to be part of the kind of the big portion of the overall Marvin Grove plan. And really, Tract 1B takes what was already a good project with Tract 1A and is just adding more of everything that made Tract 1A great, right? Starting with more open space, like Hunter talked about, we have an overall increase in the project of about 20%, and that's because I think it was 58, almost 60% of Tract 1B by itself is open space, and that's a combination of that lawn, those existing canopy trees, as well as that, that pond that's serving double duty as both a stormwater detention pond, but also really activating that and kind of creating an amenity, a water feature with having that 5-foot walking path around the pond. That path connects to the existing trail system and the applicant's proposed connection. There's going to be a fountain or an aerator in that pond, and it is going to be a wet pond all year round. So really taking taking a stormwater detention pond and turning it into kind of this really nice amenitized focal point for Tract 1B, activating that open space and creating a place where people can enjoy the open space and kind of go back and forth between Village Hall and Marvin Grove. We've also got more circulation. We got that double drive with better circulation aisles, increasing the connectivity between Tract 1A, Tract 1B. It just makes it easier to get around the property. And kind of like Hunter talked about, we've got more parking. So we've kind of ran some back the napkin numbers, just here in the planning board, but the inclusion of Tract 1B and new Tract 2 in the project basically doubles the amount of parking for the project without doubling the amount of square footage for commercial. So we're taking the existing approved parking for Tract 1A, and we're actually creating more parking density per square foot of commercial with the inclusion of Tract 1B and new Tract 2 in the project. And we've talked about the Heritage District has no minimum parking requirement, so obviously any amount of parking meets the ordinance requirement. But as far as what is an appropriate amount of parking, I think it's important to keep in mind that the Heritage District is supposed to be a pedestrian-oriented, walkable zoning district. And so by nature, if you're going to emphasize the pedestrian realm, you're going to de-emphasize the parking a little bit. But kind of how Hunter talked about, the applicant has listened to the planning board feedback. We've reached out to both the church and the village about creating those additional opportunities for overflow parking and continuing to explore those options. And really, the last thing that Tract 1B provides more of is just more connection, more amenities. Like we've talked about, we're activating that open space. We're adding those 2 additional buildings that are going to have a nice mix of uses that folks are really going to be able to enjoy. Walk around, walk to the pond. You know, maybe you go get your ice cream. You go get a coffee. You can walk around that open space, enjoy the pond, enjoy the trail system as well. So if we move on to the cross sections, the elevations, these are the same cross sections that we saw last time at the planning board. On the left, it's the cross section between the project and the church. So if you're looking right down the property line, there's that 7-foot tall solid wood fence on the project side of the property line. There's the evergreen screening. And then on the civic or church side, there's existing vegetation there. And then if we look on the right side, that is the cross section between the project and the existing trail system that kind of comes off of Village Hall. And then beyond that, even further to the right, would be the preserve. But you can see there is again, a solid 7-foot solid wood fence, evergreen screening, and then we've got additional buffer per the ordinance, and then you hit the property line. And then from there, there's 30 feet of existing greenway, that existing vegetation, and the trail. So providing lots of buffering between the project and the adjacent uses. And then I think if we go on to the next one, we should have our elevations. Again, these are the same elevations that we're all familiar with from the first 2 meetings of the planning board. There's one elevation, and then on the next one.
And I want to add on this one is I know that from feedback from planning board as well as the village council that there was some recommended changes, some of the color palette on this one. The applicants already agreed to that, and so we're going to incorporate some of that into the development agreement to be considered a part of approval. But this is still what the overall design of the building, without having the colored elevation, is still the design of the building remain the same. It's mainly the color of the elevation that will potentially change.
Yeah, so the design language and the architectural design is going to stay the same. I'm still emphasizing that, the really intentional design work by Zebsa Capital, really honoring those kind of heritage designs that are highlighted in the Heritage District Small Area Plan, and conforming that building design language to the Heritage District. And if we go to the next one, we have the additional proposed building. And so those are the 2 proposed buildings for Tract 1B. The building proposals for Tract 1A are staying the same as was previously approved. And then if we go to the next.
So each building has a completely different design. There's no, I know in the initial phase 1, there was, it was designed to look like it was existing buildings, various buildings already on the property. But with the addition of 2 more buildings, now every single building is going to have a different design and a different style?
Right, so
Not that I'm asking for.
yeah, the buildings are going to be distinguishable from each other. There's no,
Wait,
it's
sorry,
not
say
going
that one more time?
to, each building is going to have a different design.
We do have
Yeah.
elevators, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. And the first phase 1, phase 1, where the building on the site plan gets a few back.
I think if you go, yeah,
There you go.
there you'll have
Okay,
the big.
top left-hand corner. Is that going to be the restaurant, the bar,
Right, so
that
if
might
you
be the
go,
first building that you
yes,
build?
so if you go, that top left building, that is the existing crane house.
But that's going to be your first construction part, right? That'll be the first one to open if you had it your way.
Right, so as far
Where's-
as far as timing goes, it's, yeah.
Where's the main entrance? Are we looking at a right in, right out?
Correct. So it would be right in.
So the gray area is our main,
So this is the entrance.
so how do so to go to that first building that you're building, up in the top left-hand corner, we got to go all the way through the parking lot and come up and around?
You'd circulate the
Right.
area. I mean,
So
in Park. I
Newtown
mean,
Road's going to be right in, right out only.
Easy to get out, little difficult to get in.
But adding that second drive, really, adding that second drive and the additional kind of circulation aisles really helps the overall circulation for the site.
So you really, so if I'm coming from
Firethorn.
from Firethorn, I've got to come,
You'll come
hit
down.
the traffic circle.
Yep.
Come all the way around, right in.
Right, there's a median on Newtown Road.
Yeah,
so.
we can't, and then we don't want to make a left from there.
Correct, and that, with, this does open it up. The original intent, even with just track 1A, was to still be right in, right out, but this does open up that circulation. It also, you know, within providing a median in the middle, you won't have any potential anybody stopping for a left turn. So yes, it's a little bit, it will help with overall circulation between this roundabout, as well as to the Marvin, Newtown roundabout. So same thing, if you were leaving the development and you wanted to go down Waxhaw Marvin Road, yes, you would have to go down and go around the circle and then come back. However, that's the safest from a transportation standpoint, instead of trying to making a left turn, especially in this area, there's a bowl. So, yeah, so,
No, I'm agreeing with it. I just wanted to make sure that that's what I was seeing.
Yeah.
is there anything else you want to?
If the planning board has no more questions, just kind of leave you with, Marvin Grove is improving on a great start. We're creating an open and connected and engaged amenity zone, open space, and this really nice, close, really village shopping center feel, and really realizing the vision of the Marvin Heritage District Small Area Plan, creating that seamless, walkable, pedestrian-oriented experience for folks.
And I also just want to add, from the square footage numbers provided in my staff report is basically the gross building square footage. The actual usable and leasable space will be less than that, because where they'll have to have the elevator and stuff, so it's going to be eating into the actual floor plan of the leasable commercial space. I don't think, do we have that? Do you have that number? Do you know?
So, yeah, so net.
Have you divided retail, office?
So as far as the mix of square feet between the uses, it hasn't been divided yet. We don't have a lease up right now, but,
The second floor most likely will be all offices.
Yes.
Is that right? That the plans could change, but.
yeah,
that's the
could
plan.
change, but,
Yeah. And bottom floor mostly
yeah.
retail.
And then as far as, I think we were talking about as far as like net floor area for the whole project, it's 46.5.
What is, I know this isn't part of the plan, but what is actually happening with the Crane store?
So right now, the Crane store, so new track 2 is included in the rezoning. So if approved, the Crane store property will go to Heritage District commercial only. And currently the only allowed use on the new track 2 property would be a convenience store without gas pumps. That's the closest kind of analogous use to the historical use of the property, that the kind of country store, general store, but still in discussions with the trust as to,
What is it, 1448? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes.
yeah, so the existing building is 1448.
You're very,
The gross floor area on new track 2 is capped at 1,500. So it's a small building.
you can get a nail salon.
Or ice cream shop or coffee shop? I mean, there's
Correct.
like a million
So
things you can put in there.
what, in the current draft development agreement, as Matthias was mentioning, the only permitted use on track 2 is a convenience store. So it's basically the general store use. And with that being said, the owners of the trust, I think, are requesting a little bit more uses. So that's minor things that we're hashing out. Looking at the use table in 8.1, there is a very, very small handful of uses that could fit in that existing structure. And therefore, I've already had the conversation with the applicant, and we're going to have the conversation with the trust to find out those details, but it's not going to be like, for example, a restaurant would not be allowed here because there's no way you can add on a commercial kitchen with the size of the property and where it's located, there would be no possible way to add a commercial kitchen on. Same goes for, I mean, certain uses that require a little bit larger space. I mean, it's going to be very limited on what it could be utilized for.
But that will, once that's decided by the owners, they would then come back and submit for their,
So right now, as it's being proposed, convenience store is the only allowed use, meaning that if they utilize that use, they wouldn't have to come back. If they want to change the use, then they would have to come back and amend their portion. Those are some of the, and that's how it was originally recommended. That's how it was originally kind of proposed by the applicant to the trust property. Just today, the trust property came back saying they wanted to be allowed more permitted uses without having to come back to, through this process through with planning board and council. Correct.
so, wait, so how do we approve this if that's still very much up in the air and up for discussion?
Very good question. In short, the goal would be to ultimately, like, we could still kind of, there are terms in the development agreement that still would require them to, unless they're meeting the original kind of like overall approval for tract 1A and 1B, they would have to come back and get those approvals even from an architectural standpoint. There's terms in that development agreement that basically states that the building's supposed to remain. It's supposed to be upfitted to, it's back to its historical original character. And same thing with like, and meet the kind of the color and design of the overall Marvin Grove development. If they wanted to paint it purple, they'd have to come back. Like, I mean, it's stuff like that where there are terms in that development agreement, which that development agreement is between the village, the applicant, as well as the trust property. So they're a third party on this agreement. So,
Well, I think if we approve this, we're approving it because that's their main entrance.
No, I
Well-
mean, like, but,
I mean, but the
We're-
building
we're
the building will come
approving-
back later, but I think as far as that's,
no,
So-
they're saying that, no, this is all part of the same approval, so, because it's tract 1 and 2, and the Crane Store is on tract.
so you're looking at basically
they're gonna have to.
recommending the approval of that. The development agreement is tied with the rezoning. However, the development agreement obviously is what the final details are, what's going to be worked out over the next month.
So if this is approved, the only thing they can put in as far as you're telling us is a convenience store.
It currently is what was proposed.
Right.
And maybe
Now
I
these-
can jump in here too.
Yeah.
The way that kind of the uses permitted is structured on new track 2, it's pretty similar to the system that Marvin Gardens used, where you had kind of a main, main development and then out parcels, where the actual improvements on those out parcels would be determined later. It's kind of a similar situation here, where we've got new track 2 has that one, that allowed use, and there is that language in the development agreement that like the architectural standards on new track 2 are gonna use the same kind of design language as the overall Marvin Grove. But the main thing with like approving for 1A, 1B, and new track 2 is that the zoning on new track 2 is just gonna shift over to Heritage District Commercial only, and then whatever the permitted uses are.
So, and to further that, so the example of Marvin Gardens is you have out parcels. And in the conditional zoning and those design standards for those out parcels, there are limited uses in those out parcels. For example, only out parcel 1 in Marvin Gardens was allowed a gas station, and that's where it's at. With that being said, it's structured just like that, but however, they can always come back and try to amend to change that kind of vision and use. So like I said, staff will have to work with Zepsa Capital as well as the Historic Trust to finalize that. I believe like there's benefits from both parties here to have those uses kind of outlined in set in stone, as in like what it is currently being proposed, just because you don't want to have, obviously with having 2 different owners of 2 different tracks, you don't want to have conflicting type developments and or, things that aren't going to be a big fit. So those minor details, like I said, and council's gonna feel the same way, and so that could just lead, like I said, all those have to be mutually agreed upon and included in that development agreement. So those conversations will be continuing to be had as to ensure that those uses, like I said, are at least the best and highest use for track 2.
Did you write us a,
Motion?
yeah,
So it's gonna get,
you didn't write one?
no, I can
No,
send
there are
one.
3 options.
But I mean, how do you want me to do this?
Which part of it?
So
I didn't scroll down far enough.
if planning board wants to recommend approval, you know, there were conditions that were recommended and already approved as part of tract 1A. And it's recommended that it recommend approval with those same conditions. There aren't any other recommended conditions specifically to tract 2 or tract 1B. They have, anything that's been recommended, they have already incorporated in. So therefore, there is no other staff recommended conditions for the overall site. However, you know, that's part of this discussion. I don't know if there were any more that planning board wanted to discuss. Once again, these conditions have to be agreed upon between the applicant and the village, but
I mean, I think, are we doing these in 2 separate ones, or are we doing them all together? Is it 2 separate motions for track, or no, it's one motion?
it's one
because
motion to
being
recommend approval of conditional zoning 24-1 with the already agreed, consented upon conditions.
Do you need the motion to be changed in the system?
Yeah. Yeah, because I didn't put it. You want me to send it to you? Let me type this out.
Just for clarification, if, number 1, to recommend approval of conditional rezoning submission as proposed, you're saying there's already conditions on there?
So there were conditions a part of the original
Okay.
For phase 1,
for phase 1, and it basically just kind of,
Those are, there's no,
and they've already,
yeah.
yeah.
okay. So if we wanted to add something, we go 2. If we didn't like it at all, we go 3.
Well, but 2 is because we're adding phase 2, and there was the parking discussion, and the addition of those 25 to 36 spots that Marvin currently owns the land for, that would fit into that second
I got you.
second recommendation.
Makes sense.
I would like for someone to take a look at the ADA. To me, it does not seem right. You can't do 200 feet. It can't be like a direct line. It has to be actually a walking path. So I would just like someone to confirm that.
Have you done that? Have you done that?
Yeah, the site as proposed complies with the,
Sorry?
Is
My-
it
my-
ADA compliant right now?
my understanding is that the site is ADA compliant.
So are there ramps to the sidewalks on any of the other buildings? I know there are 2 ramps where the handicap parking is, but unless there's a continuous sidewalk from those ramps. There are, it's just hard to see on the.
They're not going to get their building permit.
No, I understand that, but it's just based on the visual, you just can't see the ramps. You can see the 2 ramps, like right there where all the ADA parking is, but,
They wouldn't be able to get a CO with that.
no, I understand that. It's just, putting it all in one place still is just,
I know. So do you want to
yeah,
add
so
the additional number 2 with parking?
how would we structure, Austin, how would we structure with the additional parking, like,
Number 2 with the additional parking. Oh, thank you.
we have to refresh once.
Is there anything else besides the additional parking?
Was there anything in the, the sausage making?
Nobody likes to see how the sausage is made.
In the agreement, the development agreement? Was there anything in the development agreement that needed to go in? Well, I just want to make sure that all of the comments that, like, you know, especially that the council made about the color scheme of that one
Yep.
building that looks like it's,
So the development agreement is currently being reviewed by the village attorney. If you recall, last year, you guys made the recommendation for the rezoning. The development agreement's kind of the lovely terms of everything that's been discussed in planning board with, in those neighborhood meetings, as well as ties everything to the site plan. So basically, with your recommendation, you're agreeing for, or making the recommendation for council to approve the proposed rezoning and site plan, as well as, you know, the terms of that development agreement, which those terms are, we have a standard development agreement. Within that development agreement, it talks about, like I said, those agreed upon conditions, which all of those in the draft provided by the applicant were carried over already. So that's why I wanted to just include it in your motion, that those same conditions are moved on. But between,
it's conditions for the first one, but,
but it would apply to the site as a whole.
right, so my concern is that because we've been burned on this before, where we had a discussion about design choice, paint colors, that kind of stuff, and it wasn't captured in the development agreement, so then we weren't able to hold them to those conditions. So like with the color scheme changes of that one building, is it captured in the development agreement?
Yes, it is, because one, the elevations are tied to it. That's,
Hunt you down, Hunter.
and I've already talked with the applicant today about those revised ones for Building 4. So those will be presented to council and incorporated in.
Okay,
We've got both statements.
can I update now, I guess?
Do you want me to
Two
read it?
motions now in the system. For the second one,
Do you want me to read it?
you can, I do need to put it, it does need to be.
I'll send it to you after. I gotta clean it up.
So you guys are free to make a motion on the first one, and Hunter needs to read a statement on that one first. Go ahead, you're good to go ahead and move on the first motion.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend approval of conditional zoning application 2024-1 as submitted with the previously agreed conditions per CZ 2023-1 and the additional parking to be added to the site plan. Before we vote, Hunter, you need to read something?
No, that's one motion.
The second motion.
Oh, that's the second one.
Good to go on this one.
Do you want to say how many parking? I think you said 36 additional parking spaces. Additional parking can mean one space.
We can set a minimum.
Your number is gonna vary depending on the final, how much you can get out of that area.
But it's based off of the numbers that we crunched, like 36 should be good. I don't foresee it being less than 25. So if we want to put just that additional parking
No, 25,
or more,
yeah.
If I could jump in,
Okay.
that 36 is very much a sketch. We're not sure
Right.
what the total amount of additional parking could be.
Minimum of 25?
But I mean, additional parking.
We're editing it again, to say of at least 25?
A minimum of 25?
That's what, of at least 25.
Yeah, that works.
and
1.
I've already talked with Peter and Tom, and they're going to make that, go ahead and make sure that all that complies with turn radius and all that stuff.
She have to withdraw the first motion.
You can,
Correct.
no one formally made the motion, she just.
Yeah, we know.
Okay.
What this recommendation does is then let me go to council and finite those details.
We're just an advisory board, so
Okay, so the motion's been
don't
seconded,
sugarcoat it.
so it's something you can read it, someone can move it.
Hold on, let me refresh.
I move to recommend approval of conditional zoning application 2024-1 as submitted with previously agreed conditions per CZ 2023-1 and additional parking of at least 25 spaces to be added to the site plan. I need a second.
I second.
And all in favor? Marcus? Is he not with us anymore?
Oh, I'm here. Sorry, it was on mute. I'm in favor.
In favor, okay, thank you.
And then
All right.
the,
Sorry.
So moved, and then we're moving on to motion number 2.
so I'm going to read the prepared draft consistency and reasonable statement that you guys can recommend to be incorporated in. And, but it's just that the village council finds that the proposed rezoning of 9904 and 9908 Newtown Road, further identified by parcels 06225-009A and parcel 06225-009B, to be rezoned to the Marvin Heritage District Commercial Only, and is consistent with the goals and recommendations of the Village of Marvin 2020 Land Use Plan and the Marvin Heritage District Small Area Plan. The Village of Marvin 2020 Land Use Plan designates this area as the Marvin Heritage District, and the Heritage District Small Area Plan further designates the subject properties as Marvin Heritage District Commercial Only. The scale of the development is consistent with the proposed adopted plans. Furthermore, the development is consistent with the goals and purpose of the plan. I don't want to read all those. One being cultivating a sense of community and creating and gathering place within the Heritage District. 2, maintaining the rural character and heritage. 3, providing development adjacent to existing neighborhoods that is compatible in terms of intensity, scale, and architecture. 4, providing conservation land or in fee and lieu for future greenway connections and additional pedestrian-oriented amenities. 5, creating a walkable, compact core of neighborhood-friendly commercial, retail, and public uses and spaces. 6, reuse the existing single-family dwelling architecturally consistent with new and old development in the area to maintain the rural aesthetics. 7, proposing and further incorporation of appropriate traffic calming strategies. And 8, providing shared parking solution options and future vehicular connectivity within the district. All those are goals outlined in our land use plan as well as the small area plan. So therefore, the Village Council finds that the proposed rezoning of 9904 and 9908 Newtown Road to be rezoned to the Marvin Heritage District Commercial Only is reasonable and is in the public interest because it promotes the goals and recommendations of these adopted plans and of the adopted 2020 Land Use Plan, the Marvin Heritage District Small Area Plan, and any other officially adopted plans. Wow, that's a mouthful.
So that is, so the motion in your system is to recommend adoption of that drafted reasonableness and consistency statement as presented.
Make a motion to adopt the drafted reasonableness and consistency statement as presented.
Second.
And all in favor? Marcus? Yet an aye. All right, so moved.
All right, so with that being said, this will move to council. They will call for staff will request they call for a public hearing. This will be on their agenda for their work session on the 26th next week. The public hearing will then be scheduled for Tuesday, October 8th here at Village Hall, and potentially either voted on by Village Council that evening or it may be tabled just as it was for the previous rezoning to the October 30th work session for the final decision by the Village Council.
All right, you're out of the hot seat. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Planners update?
Oh.
Is there even one after all that you guys have been dealing with lately?
How much time you got?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
How about a highlights reel?
Yep, Marvin Loop project. The village will be conducting a public, neighborhood meeting, a public open house on that project, scheduled tentatively somewhere in late October, early November. But that's basically, that project is for the Marvin Loop portion to tie from the preserve here. And it goes from the preserve up Marvin School Road, comes around Village Hall, down Newtown Road, and then goes down to Saddle on Marvin Road. So that's really the other big project, as well as the Village Hall Park project, I believe our engineers are providing their design to Village Council, don't quote me on this, either next week or at their October work session as well, to then move forward with construction documents for construction for the part of Grand. Other than that, is there any questions on any specific subdivision developments or anything?
Is there an update on the roundabout, Joe Kerr and Marvin Road?
That's an NCDOT thing, right?
So yeah, so from a DOT update, that project is not currently funded. Staff is working, that was included in a grant submitted to CRTPO for design. That intersection, as well as the intersection of Stacy Howie and Waxhaw Marvin. The county has contracted with an engineering firm to do the design and original cost estimate that we would then use those numbers to go for funding for that project. I don't know the timeline on that because currently our next roundabout project is at the intersection of Waxhaw Marvin and
Crane or?
Bondsgrove. And that is currently in preliminary engineering, and I think is scheduled for construction in 2027. Could be later, you know how DOT is. The other thing I'll mention, Ken, you guys are getting fiber. The fiber company submitted encroachment agreements with the plans about 2 weeks ago. Our engineer's been reviewing them, so once those encroachment agreements are then approved and returned to the applicant, I would say probably within the next 6 months.
Oh, wait, they're getting Google Fiber in their neighborhood?
I do not know the
What is
service
it?
provider,
Ripple?
but I believe it's the same. Weddington Chase and a few other neighborhoods had it installed last year. So I just know that was a question that Ken had, and I was
How
like,
do
well,
you jump on that bandwagon?
they actually,
Off the record
well,
conversation?
I will mention I did give them the HOA contact for Meadowlark because they submitted that encroachment to the village. However, we can't issue an encroachment agreement for a road that's not ours. So they should be reaching out to your HOA to also potentially install in your neighborhood.
I've done my time, so I'm out.
So with the last question then had to do with that roundabout that apparently CRTPO isn't looking or hasn't even begun. Can we get reflectors or can we get lines repainted? Because I am tired of people coming into my lane when I'm coming south on there. I mean, I almost got hit head on. I mean, people just are not paying attention.
We tried many years ago to get, if you go down Marvin Road, when you get into Charlotte, they have streetlights. And
Commissioner lives in there, but.
I think those streetlights would be perfect on that area road because it's very dark there.
So streetlights, DOT does not pay for streetlights. That would be, the village can request streetlights to be installed by, it's through Union Power. Union Power submits the lighting plan to DOT. However, then the village pays for the lighting. That's, the lighted roundabouts, the village pays for the actual power to those. That intersection, once the roundabout, that project gets there, will be lighted. But that is something that we can potentially look at and discuss with council, trying to get that, going ahead and get that intersection lighted.
If you could, that'd be great. That's a very dark road with a very young driver.
And that's the thing, I mean, even if there were some lane markers on there, at least people would be able to see, because otherwise, when you're coming around there,
I like that idea.
it's frightening sometimes.
I
I mean,
think
it
traffic
also-
lights would be great there. Or, I'm sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
not traffic lights, but
street
street lights. Thank you.
I mean,
No
you could
traffic
even,
lights.
you could even just put a couple of lights there on either side of where the roundabout would be, so that you don't have to take them up again once and if the roundabout ever gets completed, but, I mean, it's just,
So you'll take that to council, okay?
Oh, yeah, I'll talk with Christine and see if we can go ahead and maybe just talk with DOT, but we'll also, if for the lighting project,
Yeah.
we'll have to be something that council approves because we'll have to commit funding to obviously pay the power to the lights. But the installations, it's, like I said, all that's done per Union Power. Yeah.
I mean,
They don't want us doing it.
what about the pole, the power pole that's right there, that one car went up, do you remember that? More than once. Literally was up on the wire, it was up in the air.
Overachiever.
Oh, could you not just add a light to that?
Well, yeah, that's how
They
do it.
can, and
They
so
are.
that what
That's
they do.
Look at next time you're on Newtown or Marvin. That's exactly, and they're, you can't even, see the streetlights are so smoked, I mean, they're,
The problem is like DOT's lighting standards, you have to at least, I mean, they have illuminated standards where it makes sure the whole roadway is illuminated. So doing it on one side, I don't know, so there would still have to be potential poles, which then gets in the question, they don't want it in the right of way, because if it's in the right of way, it requires a specialty breakaway pole for safety concerns, so then Union Power has to work and get easements from individual property owners if they don't already have it already.
I'm pretty sure you can just add them to the existing poles.
You can, it's just, having that one added,
Yeah.
I don't know how many power poles are out there, along that, I haven't, without on the top of my head, but,
Up and they cross the street right before the Firethorn entrance, the power lines cross over onto the other side.
so I mean, that's something we can look at with Union Power, because they could add a light to those, and as long as it illuminates the whole roadway and there's no gaps, then they could potentially get that installation done.
I mean, one other area of concern is that the portion of the road that is on the Mecklenburg-Union County line that floods, like it'll go underwater. Like, when it's dark, you can't tell that it's underwater until you're right up on it, so.
We already are working on signs to have enabled when it is flooded, so.
At least on our portion,
Last time they flooded it, they brought out
temporary barricades.
Yeah.
barricades the last
I was gonna say, but it usually takes someone to
stuck in there.
get stuck or,
You're a little preemptive with
just, I mean, just even
Hey, it's
having,
gonna
having a
rain
light
4
there would be
inches.
helpful.
Well, and I will mention, that's where, I'll give props to our Public Works Department. During heavy rain events, they're out there checking these areas, these low-lying areas, as well as for safety concerns, as well as, and so, with the big rain that we had back in January, even the hurricane a few weeks ago, they were out and about and assisting with getting those roads potentially identified, notifying the Sheriff's Department as well as the county emergency management to make sure that that's updated on those websites and so on, so we can avoid, hopefully, people driving through that. But, they do it anyway, so.
Too bad we can't regulate the stink coming from the, that's always, I recycle my air before I get there. All right, I don't think there are any action items to review.
I yield back.
Board member comments? Why don't we start with our folks online? So, Marcus?
No comments for me. I will be back next month.
Next month. Okay, well, it's great to see you regardless. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
Bob?
No comments for me, but thank you for everybody for being there today.
Thank you, Bob.
Staff, thank you very much.
Ditto. Thank you, staff.
All right, hang in there, staff. Let us know how we can help. And with that said, we adjourn. Oh, a motion. Can I make it? I'm making the motion to adjourn.
All right, I'll second. Go ahead.
I'm gonna steal your thunder.
Yeah, you did.
All right,
I
all in
wasn't paying
favor of
attention.
adjourning?
Aye, aye.
All right.
I second.
So moved.
I'm gonna open.